Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Reading with Rod. I'm your host, Rodrigo, and today we're going to talk about this wonderful book called Hidroponia, or in English, Hydroponics. This book was written by the author Carlos M. González. He is a local author from here in Saltillo, but actually he's from another city, Querétaro, and that's kind of what this book is about. He tells a story of how he moved away at an early age and how he grew up not having roots in the ground. And that's why the book is titled Hidroponia, or hydroponics. And if you don't know, hydroponics is an agricultural technique where you grow up plants outside of soil and you grow it essentially floating in water. That way you can save space on land and etc. But this video is not about hydroponics. It's about this book. It's, well, first of all, I want to say it was a wonderful book. I read it in one night. It's a short, sweet book. It really gets you thinking, really makes you reflect, especially if you yourself, like myself, are someone that's moved, that is living in another city, that was uprooted in their childhood. You can really connect with the author's story. He tells of his relationship with his parents and the struggles he's had connecting with other people, and how not having those roots made it more difficult to connect with all the locals in the city. And part of it was because he's not in on a lot of the local culture, the local lore, and he even talks about that he can't even really name. He didn't understand geographical markers, why certain geographical markers that had certain names that had no context anymore because the context is from the past. He also talks about his struggle with connecting with the other kids, getting bullied, and even connecting with his own family. Because at least from my perspective, and having my own experience with this, sometimes even though you move along with your family, your experience is very different from your parents' experience. Your parents already grew up and they had their own childhood, and they didn't actually move away until they were much older, and they don't really understand what it's like for a kid to be moving around and how that affects their own experience. And sometimes it's hard to relate even to your own kid, and that's kind of what he talks about with the relationship he had with his father. And really, he explores quite in depth that friction that he managed for many years. On the other hand, he also talks about his unfortunately short relationship with his mother, where she passed away when he was around 7 years old, I believe. And she didn't really talk about her own upbringing, her own past, and neither did his father. But that's where he starts this investigative journey to find out his parents' past, to better understand the relationship that he has with them, why it is the way it is, and at the same time understand why it's hard for him to connect with other people. And he does it in such a relatable fashion. He talks about it almost as if you were a friend. It was very raw confession and goes into various details of his family's history, where his father from Querétaro decided to, or even his father's father, his grandfather, was from a small town in the state of Querétaro, I believe, and they moved to the big city in order to get a better job. He talks about how his grandfather was in agriculture, but he moved into selling furniture, and that's what his father ended up doing and moving to Saltillo. And his mom, which was the more mysterious story, they talked about how he needed to call up a bunch of different family members that he hadn't spoken to in many years, and he traveled back to his mom's hometown and talked with them, and they just told him of her upbringing, how difficult it was, and how she actually had to move around from town to town, nearby towns, but because of different familial circumstances, her own parents passing, and it's very, very interesting how he ends up deciphering or figuring out that he's not the only one that is a hydroponic plant or that doesn't have roots in the ground. And that's where he started to understand more his parents, and started, you can sort of read into his journey of forgiveness of his relationship with his father. And it's a very comforting book, especially for myself. I had similar experience in moving away and struggling to connect with people, and also not knowing your family, not knowing big parts of your family. And that's really what this book is about. And it's a very short but satisfying read. I highly recommend it. And if you do want to read it, I honestly, I can't tell you where else to find it other than the publishing house, which is local here to Saltillo. I actually went myself to the publishing house and they gave me a free copy, because this was a book sponsored by the government after they made an open call contest for local authors, and Carlos González, he won the contest and they published his book in the series Letras del Desierto, Letters of the Desert. And I'm not gonna lie to you, it's probably gonna be very difficult to get your hands on this book. If you're from Saltillo, I recommend you go to, I believe it's Quintanilla Ediciones. If you give them a call and you tell them that you want this book, Hidroponia, they have quite a few copies left. If not, I don't know, maybe if it's online and I find it, I'll put a link to it in the description, and hopefully you can read it. Anyway, I highly recommend you read this, just as a closing statement. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you had any thoughts, if you've actually read this book, I'd like to know what you thought of it. If you have any experiences yourself with moving away or struggling to connect with your own community because you're an outsider, yeah, leave a comment down below and we can discuss a little further. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe. I hope you have a wonderful day, and God bless you.